Blog Talk Radio.
Michemo Afurakanu Afuraitkaitnut Neye Ojirada Medinde Odwirafo Kwesi Ptah Akhan Akwamuman Amaruka Atifi Mu Odwirafo Odwiraman Mu. Greetings to all Afurakani Afuraitkaitnut people, meaning Africans, black people. Today is OKRA Day, Purification Day. My name is Odwirafo Kwesi Nehem Ptah Akhan, Odwirafo of the Akwamu Nation in North America. Within Odwiraman, the Purified Nation, Afurakani Afuraitkaitnut people in the Western Hemisphere. Yet I say we thank you for tuning in to the broadcast. And we've opened up the chat room. If you have any questions or comments in the chat room, you must log in as a user in order to interact in the chat room. If you have questions or comments on the phone line, simply hit 1 so that your hand is raised. And we're going to make sure that the proper time is posted in the event. Okay. So for those who are new to the broadcast, we have 4 broadcasts on a weekly basis. We have Akanfo Nanasom, Ancient Authentic Akhan Ancestral Religion, on Joda on Monday nights, where we deal specifically with the Akhan expression of ancestral religion. First and foremost, because we are Akhan. Secondly, because of the misinformation being propagated regarding Akhan cosmology, ancestral religion, spirituality, ritual practice, the nature of the abosom, the deities, the nature of the nananom, nsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, and various other topics coming from the Western Hemisphere, as well as those who are on the continent, in Ivory Coast, in Ghana, who have been infected with white culture, pseudo-religion, and thus they've infected their presentation of the culture. So we deal with ancient, authentic Akhan ancestral religion, going back to our ancestral origins in ancient Kanat. A title of ancient Nubia is Kanat, the Khan land, the first or foremost land from which the Kanat or Kanitu people come from. Akani people come from. We migrated, some of us north to establish Kemet. Some of us remain south and west, as well as parts of the east, southwest and east of Kemet in the Kana Empire. A couple of thousand years ago, after the fall of Kemet, some of our people migrated west to reestablish the Kanat Empire in the western part of the continent. We established the Empire of Kanat or Ghana, the ancient Nubian Empire. About 1,000 years later, some of our people migrated from that region further south towards the forest belt in the regions of today's contemporary Ghana and Ivory Coast. We reestablished Akana civilization in those regions. And then hundreds of years after that, some of our people were taken from those regions and forced into North Central South America, the Caribbean, and Europe during the Musuo Kessie, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era. And this is how some Akhan people ended up in the Western Hemisphere. We maintained our ancestral religious traditions. We maintained Akhan ancestral religion. Thus, as we say, Surin in Suriname, South America, Winti is the Akhan ancestral religion practiced in Suriname. Obia is the Akhan ancestral religion practiced in Jamaica. Hoodoo is the Akhan ancestral religion practiced in the United States. Hoodoo from the Akhan term undu, meaning medicine from roots, trees, plant life, as well as mineral life, but also to become heavy with the spirit through conjure. And the term conjure comes from the Akhan term kanche, meaning to utter incantations to bring down the abosom and nananom nsamanfo, the deities and spiritually cultivated ancestral spirits. So this is what we deal with on Joda on Monday nights, on Awukuda Wednesday nights, also called Akuada. We have Egua Marketplace. We showcase Afurakani, Afurakani businesses, organizations, and institutions, those who have served the community in a positive capacity, also those who maintain their ancestral religious values in the process and in the context of their service to the community. We have published the OKRA Economic Development Model. It is a model of economic development rooted in our ancestral religious values. It is thus a holistic approach to economic development for Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people, African Black people, especially within Odwiraman, the Purified nation, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people, African Black people in the Western Hemisphere. Part of that process in the Akhan Economic Development Model is the strategy we employ, which we call Starve the Beast and Feed the Pride. We make an assessment on a weekly basis to determine what funds we would have potentially wasted with the whites in our spring, and we starve the beast and feed the pride. We reallocate those funds away from the white businesses and redirect them to the business, organization, or institution of the week. So we target one Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut business, organization, or institution per week for optimal capital infusion. So as we always say, if you take $10 away from a white business that you would have wasted at Walmart or CVS or wherever, redirect those funds, starve the white beast, and feed the black pride, then that's a $10 infusion of capital in the business of the week. When 1,000 people engage that process because we're operating on the same level and targeting the same business of the week, that's a $10,000 infusion of capital into the black business, which was taken away from the white businesses. That $10,000 infusion of capital will allow the business to hire within the community, hire black people, of course, from the community, full-time, immediately in the course of a week. Also, to expand their product lines and their services to us, to serve us at a greater capacity. If we do not engage this process consciously and deliberately on a weekly basis, then by default, we leave the funds in the hands of our enemies, the whites and their offspring, and by default, we are financing our own oppression. So we must engage the process, starve the beast, and feed the pride. So this is what we deal with on Egwa Marketplace Day. And on Yauda, Thursday nights, also called Yada and Abada, we have AWAREESEM, which means affairs of the nation. We deal with current events, issues that are affecting our nation, and how we deal with these from a nationist perspective, from an Amaniye or Amani perspective. We deal with nationism, the purification of nationalism. Amaniye means nationism. It means things connected to the nation. Amai means nation. Adiye means things, objects, entities, and so forth. Amain, die, or amane, amaniye means things of the nation. We're talking about nationism, the purification of nationalism. When we talk about nationism, the nation is a living, breathing entity. Just like an organ is a functioning entity composed of a number of different living entities who support cells that support the entity of which they are a component part. A nation and Oman is a living, breathing entity governed by specific abosom, specific spiritual forces. And we as cells within that living, breathing entity, when we support the functions of that entity, we're working interdependent with regard to one another, but we're also working to support that living, breathing entity. When we have that proper perspective of what an Oman is, a natural coalescing of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people in a specific region of the body of the Earth Mother. We interface with her in this region. We align with her in this region. We blend ancestral blood circles in this region in the context of interfacing with this region of Asasea for the Earth Mother, and the specific and unique manifestation and expression of the abosom, the forces of nature in this specific region of the Earth Mother. Then we form naturally and organically an Oman that's governed by specific abosom forces in nature. And we align with that. We have a unique polity, a unique collective. This is nationism, and what supports the needs of nationism and what does not support the needs of nationism, we can make a proper decision. So this is what we deal with on AWAREESEM, Affairs of the Nation, on Yauda on Thursday night. Tonight is Abinada Tuesday. We have ODWIRA, which means purification. The term Jira means purification in Akhan. It also means to celebrate a ceremony of purification. For example, the New Year, 7-day New Year celebration, observed by many Akanfo, it's called ODWIRA. And of course, we have our 7-day New Year celebration in September leading up to the autumn equinox, which is our ODWIRA celebration, our New Year celebration. September 22nd was the first day of our new year of 13,017. The term Jira in the language of ancient Kemet, which you can find in the Medusa, the hieroglyphs, also means purification. It also means to celebrate a ceremony of purification. So when we're talking about Ojira, we're talking about purification. We deal with ancestral religion, which in essence is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. That means through ritual, we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. And through ritual, we reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject, to repel, to hate, to repulse, in order to restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions, and thus realign ourselves with divine order. So the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance are the expansive and contractive poles of Nanasom, which is just a term for ancestral religion. Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut, ancestral religion. We say that Ojira, purification, operationalizes Nanasom. Purification operationalizes our practice of ritually incorporating law and ritually restoring balance so that we can align ourselves with order. That is our culture, our ancestral culture, our Amamre, our ancestral culture is the divine law or love of order, the acceptance of order, the divine law or love of order, and the divine rejection or hatred of disorder. We incorporate those things that are in harmony with order so that we can function in a harmonious fashion. We reject, hate, repel, repulse those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject that will otherwise place us out of harmony with order. Just as you inhale and take in nutrients, but you exhale and expel toxins. You consume food for fuel, vitamins, minerals, and so forth, but you eliminate waste, eliminate toxins. You take in and you push out. You receive and you reject or you repel. Inhalation, exhalation, expansion, and contraction. The divine law or love of order, the divine acceptance of order, the divine rejection, hatred, repulsion of disorder and its purveyors. That is our culture. So we seek to align every thought, intention, and action with divine order every moment of every day. That is ancestral culture. We can achieve that through the practice of ancestral religion. When we are out of alignment with order and our thoughts, intentions, and actions on a moment-to-moment basis become out of harmony with order, then we engage in the ritual practice to reincorporate law and restore balance, ancestral religion, so that we can move forward in a harmonious fashion and get back on track. Purification, Odwira, operationalizes Nasom, operationalizes ancestral religion. We purify ourselves, purify our condition, purify our mindsets, purify our concepts, purify our understanding so that we can move forward harmoniously. This is what we do with OKRA broadcast. Of course, this broadcast is called AWAREESEM. Awaree means marriage. In the Akhan language, Asem means issues or affairs. So AWAREESEM means affairs of marriage, issues dealing with marriage. We're talking about forced polygamy as a form of domestic abuse. So we want to deal with the nature of Awaree, marriage, and the polygamous marriage structure and its effect upon nation building, restoration regarding Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people, African black people in the Western Hemisphere. In Odwiraman, the purified nation, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people in the Western Hemisphere as a unique collective of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people on Earth. We operate in this region of the Earth Mother's body. We interface with her and her unique expression of energy in this region. We eat the foods that come from her, take in the medicines that come from her, plant life and mineral life and animal life and so forth. We become possessed by the abosom as they manifest in this region of the earth mother. We have blended ancestral blood circles for hundreds of years with Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people in this region of the earth mother. We are a unique collective. So our approach to Amain Sessu, nation building, restoration is unique to us. We don't depend on how other people are engaging the nation building process. The manner in which Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people on the continent are developing nation building strategies is different than the way we need to develop nation building strategies. So we want to address in that context the nature of forced polygamy as a form of domestic abuse. Now, when we talk about Awaree, marriage, yes, first and foremost, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people established the marriage institution. The marriage institution has nothing to do with the white snare offspring. Criminal white snare offspring beasts living in Northern Europe, in the ice of Northern Europe and so forth, they had no concept of marriage until they came in contact with our people invading Southern Europe and Afuraitkaitnut after the last ice age, after they began to spill out of Northern Eurasia and so forth, and came in contact with our people and observed that we had a divine balance of male and female. Our Awaree or marriage institutions are rooted in the divine foundational relationship, the balanced complementary relationship of Aminet and Amen, called Nyamewa and Nyame, the great mother and the great father, the supreme being, who function together as two halves of that divine whole, the supreme being. Just like it takes a male and a female to come together as two halves of a whole so that they can release the sperm and ovum as two halves of a whole that fuse together to function as a unit, is because of that foundational relationship of Aminet and Amen, Nyamewa and Nyame, as we say in Akhan, great mother and great father, who function harmoniously together as a unit, which we can call the supreme being. Our marriage institutions are rooted in that foundational relationship and reflect that foundational relationship. Now, because we established the marriage structure, there are different kinds of marriage structures within Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut society. Yes, there are polygamous marriage structures, there's monogamous marriage structures. We already understand that. We founded these different structures. The key here is this manifestation of forced polygamy. Of course, monogamous marriage is typically, even in polygamous societies, the vast majority of people who are engaged in marriage are still monogamous. It's a very small percentage in an Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut traditional polygamous society or society that allows for polygamy. A very small percentage of the people engaged in that process. The vast majority who become married are still engaged in monogamous marriages. So yes, they do exist, but just because they exist, does that mean they need to be affected or utilized or employed? Heart surgery exists. Does that mean you need to go and make your appointment tomorrow to get heart surgery? People have appendectomies. They exist. The procedure exists, and it can be successful. Does that mean you need to schedule your appointment tomorrow? When we make decisions about what we need to engage in, it's based on what is functional, what is harmonious. It is based on the contribution of the Afurakani man, the contribution of the Afuraitkaitnut woman regarding what is functional, what is harmonious, what is needed. And the desires of the male do not supplant the desires of the female. So when we're talking about this forced polygamy as a form of domestic abuse, first, we're not talking about the specific kind of forced polygamy that you see manifest in brainwashed Negroes who have embraced the pseudo-fake religions of Islam and Hebrewism and all of this nonsense, where they're worshiping fictional cartoon character gods who never existed, such as Yahweh or Allah and so forth. dealing with fictional cartoon characters in the Bible and Quran who never existed of any form or of any race whatsoever. Yes, in their fake systems brought on by the whites and their offspring and learned by the whites and their offspring, some of them will simply take on a second wife or a third wife or fourth wife and tell the current wife, you just need to deal with it. That's physically a forced polygamy. Some of them will say, well, this is part of the culture and you just need to deal with it. That's a forced polygamy. And of course, that's idiotic. That's self-explanatory. The kind of forced polygamy that we're talking about is that kind of forced polygamy that manifests as a form of domestic abuse within the circles of individuals who claim to be Afrocentric, claim to be African-centered, claim to be involved in some form of quote-unquote African traditional religion or traditional spirituality and so forth. So it manifests not as a physically forced polygamy where you just pull somebody in the house, but it typically manifests as a forced polygamy in the form of emotional abuse. When we talk about domestic abuse, it can be physical violence, but domestic abuse can also be verbal abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, forcing somebody to engage in behaviors or restrain themselves or restricting their behavior, utilizing mental distress, emotional distress, psychological distress, pressure on the individual. In this kind of forced polygamy, people use all kinds of pseudo-esoteric or pseudo-spiritual or pseudo-cultural or pseudo-Afrocentric arguments to force the female into accepting polygamy, even though against her will, naturally, she wouldn't embrace it. But you're trying to force her into it. So when you have that kind of force, when the female is totally against it, and you try to force her into it by talking her into it or even browbeating her psychologically and pseudo-spiritually, you're engaged in a form of domestic abuse. And that comes from the whites and their offspring. That means you have not left the mindset of the whites and their offspring. So you have a number of individuals, a number of females who are suffering in these quote-unquote ancestral, traditional, African traditional, quote-unquote polygamous unions. But they're staying in these unions because they've been given this pseudo-Afrocentric rationale about why they should be going against their will. We have a male taking on the mantle of a spiritual leader in the family. And the final word with regard to what decisions are being made, the final word is coming from the male. And he believes he's the spiritual leader. And the female or the females in the family say, well, you know, we can all contribute our ideas, but the final word rests with him because he's the spiritual leader. In our culture, there's no such thing. The male is not the spiritual leader of the family. He's the spiritual male leader of the children, and the female, the mother, is the spiritual female head of the children. And when children have their ideas and desires and their wants and so forth, and they contribute that and say, this is what we want to do and this is what we don't want to do, they can express themselves and so forth, but the final word comes from the mother and the father. So they allow the children to express themselves to a certain extent, but then the final word rests with the parents. The Afurakani male, with regard to the Afuraitkaitnut female, trying to take on this mantle of the spiritual leader, that comes from the whites and their offspring, trying to subordinate the female identity. It is not part of our ancestral culture. When we talk about the male as a leader, when you're talking about physically, yes, you can talk about leading with regard to certain situations. You're walking into the house, you've been away on vacation for a week or so or more, you open the door, the male opens the door first, goes into the house to make sure everything is straight, make sure there's no one in the house ready to attack. They would take on that frontal attack first. They're taking the lead. If you're asleep and you hear a noise in the night, You don't send the female, the wife, to get up and go check it out. You take the lead. That's the male being the leader, quote unquote, in the home. That's a physical leadership capability. Male Jata or male lion. The female lions, the Jata Bere, the male lions, the Jata Nini, both of them can hunt. Both of them can fight. The female lionesses, the Jata Bere, they hunt on more of occasions than the males very often. But when it comes to fighting, and they do fight, but when it comes to the hyenas, the males are a little bit bigger. And the hyenas, where they may be able to tangle with the female, the lioness, the Jata Bere, when they see the Jata Nini coming, which is a little bit bigger and more forceful, they fear the male because the male will rip them apart. One bite into the neck will crush them and kill them. So they know who's more powerful. They know where to go and where not to go. In the same sense, within our families, we take the lead with regard to defense and protection and so forth. But when it comes to making decisions, when it comes to spirituality, you don't take on the mantle of the leader of the family because now you've fallen into the perverse culture of the whites and their offspring. The leader of the Afurakani males spiritually is his Kra, his Ka, the deity dwelling in his head region. That's a male divinity, the Odwiraman Inu, as it's called in Yoruba, the Selido, as it's called in Vodun, the Chi, as it's called in Igbo, the Ka, as it's called in Kemet, the Kra, as it's called in the Akhan tradition. That's a divinity that was assigned to you pre-incarnation, that takes up residence in the head region, that force in your head region that constantly directs you towards thoughts, intentions, and actions that are in harmony with divine order. Then you have your Nananom Nsamanfo, your spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of your direct blood circle, who have been assigned to you to give you guidance throughout the course of your life, assigned to you by Nyame wa Nyame before you even enter into the womb, to guide you throughout the course of your life on how to follow the dictates of the Kra, the deity in your head region, based on your clan affiliation, based on the manner in which you, as a part of that specific clan, that specific blood circle, operates in the world. You may need nutrients, but based on your clan, you may be allergic to certain plant life and mineral life, so you have to get the same nutrients from other plant life and mineral life based on your clan affiliation. You need to follow the direction of the cross, saying you need these specific nutrients, but the manner in which you extract them is based on your clan affiliation. The same thing with regard to occupations and endeavors and so forth. You get direction from the cross, you get that power and so forth, and direction, consciousness, but the manner in which you approach it, the guidance comes from your Nananom Nsamanfo because they lived as part of your clan and navigated life as part of that clan in a harmonious way. So your spiritual leader is the deity dwelling in your head region. That council of elders and elderesses that support the spiritual leader are your Nananom Nsamanfo, your spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors. For the female, her spiritual leader is her Kaet, her OKRAA, the deity dwelling in her head region, the Odwiraman Inu, as it's called in Yoruba, the Chi, as it's called in Igbo, the Selido, as it's called in Vodun. That female divinity in her head that was assigned to her before she even entered into the womb. That female deity that she communicates with on a regular basis that directs her with regard to every thought, intention, and action to align it with divine order. That's her spiritual leader, not you. The deity, the goddess, is her spiritual leader that was assigned to her before she even met you. You're not the spiritual leader. The spiritual council of elders and elderesses support that spiritual leader within that construct, within that governmental structure spiritually, are her spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of her direct blood circle, her Nananom Nsamanfo. And of course, they give her direction with regard to the manner in which she follows the dictates of her Kra, based on her clan affiliation. And of course, she's from an ancestral clan. For example, in the Akhan tradition, the Matric clans, you have 7 major Matric clans, Mbusiakuo. We do not marry within the same clans because that would be considered incestuous. So over 20 million Akhan people on the continent, of course, there are millions in the Western Hemisphere, all belong to one of these 7 clans. If you're from the Asona Abusia, the Asona clan, you cannot marry somebody from the same matriarch clan because that would be considered incestuous. So that means that she has her own clan, her own matriarch clan. You have your own matriarch clan. She has clan ancestresses and ancestors from that specific clan that are different from your clan. So they direct her as to the best means by which she is a part of that specific clan is to align with the deity that's dwelling in her head region. The deity dwelling in her head region is a female divinity, is not the same deity that's dwelling in your head region, which is a male divinity. That is her spiritual leader. And her council of elders and elderesses are her Nananom Nsamampa. It's no different than the governmental structure in Akhan society and other societies. You have the king and queen mother, the Ohini and Ohema. They have a council of elders and elderesses that give guidance with regard to their declarations and what they legislate and so forth. We have the same structure in our spiritual anatomy. So when you talk about a spiritual leader, that's your crop. So when you go into consultation, when the decisions need to be made, you consult with your crop, your own cry as a male, and you consult with your Nananom Nsamampo, your spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, at your own shrine of your clan and the shrine for your crop. And when decisions need to be made, the female, you communicate with the female divinity governing your crop. And you communicate with your Nananom Nsamampo, your spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of your clan at your ancestral shrine and the shrine for your crop. And then you all come together and you compare and you show how these different things can operate harmoniously. Both make a contribution. The male is not the spiritual leader that you're not going to make a deity that dwells in her head region submit to your decision. You're not going to make all of her clan ancestresses and ancestors submit to your decision. If you're engaged in that process and you're trying to put forward some pseudo-Afrocentric rationale that the male is the spiritual leader of the family, as opposed to the truth that the male and the female are the male and female spiritual leaders of the children in the family, but they have a co-equal partnership with regard to making decisions, if you try to put forward that foolish notion that the male is the spiritual leader and therefore the decisions, although the female can contribute, the final word rests with the male, you're not looking for an oyere. You're not looking for a wife. You're looking for a child. You're not looking for a complement or someone who balances you out, someone who's on the equal playing field or on the same level. You're looking for a child. You're looking for someone that you can direct. You're looking for someone that you can mold. When we procreate, give birth to children, we shape and mold them as they grow and develop because that's our responsibility. You don't shape and mold a female like you shape and mold a child. When you're seeking to shape and mold a female, what you're seeking to do is not marry a woman, you're seeking to marry a child. Now you're a pedophile. That notion of forcing the woman to be submissive comes from the whites and their offspring because they are steeped in pedophilia as well as dissexuality, homosexuality, and incest. So they don't want a woman, they want a child. They want to marry, quote unquote, their daughter, literally. They want someone to control, to mold, to shape, to raise up. That's trying to marry your daughter. That's what you're really seeking to do. So you're seeking a child. So now you become a pedophile. That's white, perverted culture. And when you have that mindset and you think that you're the spiritual leader, then you try to force not only the current child that you've molded, quote unquote, wife, into polygamous unions, but then you seek other individuals, usually younger individuals and so forth, to convince them as the quote unquote spiritual leader why they need to submit to your desires, why they need to fall in line, why they need to fold in, why they need to reject their own cry that's telling them no so they can follow you around, so they can obey your desires. And of course, when their cry is telling them no, they don't need to be involved in a union, then that means your cry is actually saying no as well, because your cry is a divinity, and you're neglecting that. The deities don't conflict with one another. The deities are forces in nature that embody divine order. They do not operate out of harmony with order. They're part of a system. They know what one another is dealing with, just like the organs in your body function in a harmonious fashion. So when you try to force and convince someone intellectually or pseudo-intellectually that they need to embrace this perverted approach and structure based on their own lust, rooted in a pseudo-rationale, then you're engaged in emotional abuse. You're engaged in verbal abuse, psychological abuse, emotional abuse. You're putting pressure, forcing a stressful situation on the individual, and now they're trying to fit into your paradigm, fit into your lustful ideals, and they're rejecting their own krawa. They're rejecting their own nanano and samanfo. Then there's a disalignment from their own krawa, the deity dwelling in their head region. They're repelling her. They're repelling their own ancestresses and ancestors of their own clan that have been with them ever since they even incarnated into the womb, and ever since they were growing and developing as a child up into adulthood. They're rejecting all of that to follow your perverse, lustful ideas and pseudo-rationale. Then you wonder why there's discordance within the relationship. And when there's discordance, then you try to force, once again, that forced polygamy through pseudo-rationales and pseudo-intellectualism, why the one who's feeling some kind of discordance and distress and emotional disalignment, that is their problem. They're just not being mature. This kind of idiocy is born of the whites and their offspring. It's born of white culture. Our people incorporating white culture and trying to put it in blackface. Eurocentric, disordered, imbalanced relationships between males and females, trying to make the female, instead of being a woman, trying to make her a little girl, trying to make her your daughter so that she can submit to you, so that you can engage in sexual activity psychologically with your own daughter. That's pedophilia. That's what's going on. And so some of our people, when they hear about ancestral religion, they hear about quote-unquote African traditional religion, and they accept polygamy. One of the first things the males think is, I can have sex with a number of women just unencumbered. So they begin to seek out a number of different women who are suffering, those who don't have a man, those who are looking for someone and so forth, even though they're not open at all to any kind of polygamous union. But if they've been suffering, or they believe that they are lonely because they haven't been able to align themselves, they haven't engaged in self-purification, they don't realize that they can take time to themselves, purify themselves, put themselves in the position to connect with the individual they need to connect with, and take that kind of time when they have it. They feel pressure, and then they go along with an individual, and then they slowly try to work their way into this whole forced polygamy situation. They slowly give them the pseudo-Afrocentric rationale, slowly force it on them day by day. Pressure builds up. They make these decisions. Very often they stigmatize themselves. They become disconnected with their family to a certain extent because their family doesn't like what's going on. So now they're even under more control by the male who's just lustful because they've already been isolated away from the family and so forth. This creates all kinds of discordance, not only in their own lives. It creates discordance in the lives of the children who are involved. It creates discordance within the Oman, within the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut Oman. When we don't have strong, balanced relationships between the Afurakani male and Afuraitkaitnut female, then of course there's no balanced relationships with regard to the children and the development of children in the community. Then the community is unstable. Community is in chaos. We talked about how physical violence, domestic violence with regard to physical abuse, leads to all kinds of criminality. It is criminality and leads to all kinds of chaos, growing from children all the way through adulthood. They're still suffering from these various things. But the same is true of emotional domestic abuse, verbal abuse, forced polygamy. forced relationships where people are suffering and can't figure out a way to extract themselves from these self-destructive relationships. Now there's tension, now there's anger, implosions, explosions, all kinds of discordance based on someone following somebody else's lust because they have a Eurocentric, pedophilic mindset wrapped up in Afrocentric jargon. So of course, first and foremost, as an adult, the Afuraitkaitnut female must recognize the nature of her spiritual anatomy. The OKRAA, the Ka'et, the divinity that dwells in your head region, is supreme. That is a child of the great Ka and Ka'et, the black substance of space, the male and female force that governs the consciousness of the supreme being. And Afuraitkaitnut female is an emanation of Amenet, the great mother, Nyamewa, just as the Afurakani male is an emanation of Amen, or Nyamewa, the great father. That line of descent, that blood circle that stretches directly from you, directly to Amenet, that is your circle of authority, moving through the abosom that governs your head and the Nananom Msamafu, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of your direct blood circle, all the way to Amenet herself. That circle of authority is that governmental structure that you submit to. Just like the circle of authority that the male submits to is the Kra that governs his head, the divinity that governs his head, the Nananom Msamafu of his blood circle, going directly to Amen or Nyame. And then when you come together, you fuse those things. And if there's disorder, then you work those things out in a balanced fashion, always submitting only to what your Kra and your Krawa says. If you can't find that resolution, then you seek those individuals who are upstanding in the community, who have balanced relationships, who can see what you're missing, and so forth. But there's no forcing one to submit to the other. That's self-destructive. So we have to look at what the nature of marriage is, and this is key for Odwiraman, the purified nation, Afurakani people in the Western Hemisphere. We see, and the reason we even did the broadcast, because we have so many individuals asking us to do a broadcast on this subject. We did a broadcast or a webcast on polygamy in general a number of years ago on our OKRA webcast, but we needed to do this specifically on forced polygamy within the pseudo-Afrocentric community and so forth. Has become a major issue. And when people hear about ancestral religion, they seek to corrupt it immediately, rooted in their own lust, wrapped up in pseudo-Afrocentric jargon. Odwiraman, the purified nation, Afuraitkaitnut people in the Western Hemisphere, we do not support this disorder of forced polygamy. And we're not talking about situations where a small percentage of individuals engage in balanced polygamous unions. There are specific situations where that can work out, but that's not the focus. People always like to default to, well, what about when it works out? We're not talking about when it works out. We're talking about what's typically going on. And it's the forced polygamy that's typically going on. So when you look at many of these unions, the majority of them are not working, and they typically do not work because typically it's forced polygamy, the vast majority. So instead of trying to focus on what's working and saying, well, we don't need to worry about this other stuff, other people are doing it, so we can do it as well, we need to focus on what's not working. If you have a pain in your side and there's a tumor and so forth in your stomach, if you go to the doctor and he says, well, your legs and your arms and your head and most of your body's all right, so let's not focus on the tumor, then you meet your demise. You focus specifically on what's actually causing the problem. You don't look beyond that and only focus on the things that are right. That's immature, that's idiotic. So what is the nature of Awaree? What is the nature of marriage? If you look at the term Awaree in Akhan, it's rooted in Awa, and then Adie means things, objects, deeds, and so forth, entities. You look at the term Wa, and what you'll find it means to prop, stay, support, to sustain, to uphold, to keep from falling by placing something under or leaning against, to hold up, to prop up, to stay, to support. It also means to screen and protect. So when we talk about screening and protecting, but also supporting, that's what wa means. And then adie means that which is there to support, uphold, establish, but also to screen and protect. So awa, adie, or awaree, that's what we're dealing with when we talk about marriage. Now, if you look in our OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood book, and then the section dealing with marriage, and the sixth section dealing with marriage, our book OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood, you can go to the page 37. So Afurakani Manhood is a book that we have published. It's divided into 7 sections, governed by the 7 divinities, the 7 days of the week, governed by the deities that govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the 7 days of the week. So each day of the week is governed by specific divinities that operate the solar, lunar, or planetary body that governs the day. We have 7 principal values of OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood. And of course, we're going to release our book, Obatain Afuraitkaitnut Womanhood, is based on that same 7 principal structure. But 7 days of the week, each day is governed by specific divinities, 7 principal values that carry the energy of the day and the divinity of the day. And there are progressive development of 7 principal values. First, we'll go through the principal values first, and then we're going to get to that 6th principal value, which is key because it deals with Awaree or marriage. So the first principal value is order. Recognize the divine order of creation, the balance of male and female. As an Afurakani man, the first principal value of manhood. We teach this to youth as well as adults. We give this book away for free when we do our workshops on OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood. We also have the free book version that's available for download permanently. The first principal value of manhood is order. Recognize the divine order of creation, the balance of male and female. Going back to that foundational relationship of Aminet and Amen, Nyamewa, Nyame, the great mother and great father, Mawu and Lisa, and so forth. The second principal value is balance. Establish that balance in every aspect of your existence. So it's the first principal value is you must recognize the order of all of creation. It is the balance of male and female. If you don't recognize that, then you'll be imbalanced from the gate. So you must recognize the divine order that governs all things, all created entities in creation, the balance of male and female, Aminet and Amen, as that principal balance. Once you recognize the divine balance of male and female, the second principal value, which is the order, you recognize that order, which is the balance of male and female. The second principal value is balance. Establish that balance in every aspect of your existence. And that includes expansion and contraction. You must consume food for nutrients you must eliminate. You must engage in work and recreation. That means you're expending energy through work, development, being productive. You also must refuel yourself through sleep and so forth so that you can regenerate and so you can function once again. All aspects of creation, there's a balance of male and female. You establish that in every aspect of your existence. You have activity that's very aggressive to a certain extent. You can also be contemplative, where you study, measure, understand, contemplate, retain information, and so forth. You have expressive or fiery expressions of emotional energy when it's time to wage war and fight. You have cool and receptive expressions, watery expressions of emotional energy when it's time to engage in other activities. When you're balanced in that way, establishing that divine balance of male and female, you don't utilize or express fiery, emotional, aggressive energy in the wrong situation to attack individuals who don't need to be attacked. But you don't also become passive and introverted when it's time to wage war. So you must balance every aspect of your life. Third principal value, arms. Arm yourself to defend the order and balance of your life. So when we talk about establishing, first recognizing divine order of creation, the balance of male and female. Once you recognize that balance, then you establish that balance in every aspect of your existence. Once you establish it within yourself, physically through diet and exercise and sleep and everything else, then spiritually through your emotions, through your mentality and so forth, through your morality. Then you establish that in your interactions with your family, interactions with your home and so forth, your community. You're establishing that balance in every aspect of your existence. Then the third principal value is arms. Arm yourself to defend the order and balance with your life. Once you recognize divine order, once you've established that order, which is the balance of male and female in every aspect of your life, then you must defend that order and balance with your life. Of course, rights in their offspring, when you establish anything that includes institutions that are balanced and so forth, they're going to seek to destroy them. So you must arm yourself with physical armaments, mental armaments, chemical and biological warfare, intellectual, on every level. Defend the order and balance with your life. The next principal value is respect. Continuously respect. And when we talk about respect, the term spect means to view, like spectate, spectator, spectacle. When you respect or review every thought, intention, and action and harmonize each with divine order. So throughout the course of your life, you're constantly respecting or reviewing every thought, every intention, every action, and harmonizing each with divine order every moment of every day. And we utilize a 7-part decision-making process rooted in our ancestral culture to arrive at that kind of respect or reviewing of every thought, intention, and action. That's what separates children from adults, the means by which we make decisions. And we make decisions rooted in respecting or reviewing continuously every thought, every intention, and every action, and aligning each with divine order. The next principal value is insight. Exercise proper insight in order to make proper judgments in life and achieve individual manhood. When you can respect and review every thought, intention, and action, then you can make judgments, make good decisions about the direction of your life, where to go, the manner in which you need to function, the kind of occupation you need to engage in, who to connect with, who to reject, who to defend yourself and your community against, who to accept, and so forth. You can make proper judgments. You can use insight and see what's coming up or over the horizon, around the corner, and avoid negative circumstances. You can look at what has taken place in the past and seeing what our people have done and what they have not done, what they have left undone, that we must take care of in the present so we can move forward in the future without lugging that old baggage into the future, making the same mistakes over and over and over again because we didn't use proper insight, trying to engage the same foolish approaches to liberation that never worked for the past 100 years, and we're still trying to employ these same approaches that are doomed from the gate because we're not exercising proper insight and therefore we're not making proper judgments. So when you exercise that proper insight, we talk about aligning with the divinity that governs that day and so forth, invoking that divinity, then you can make proper judgments in life. And when you can make proper judgments in life, then you have achieved at that point, that 5th principal value, you have achieved individual manhood. Starting off with order, 2nd principal value, balance, 3rd principal value, arms, 4th principal value, respect, and then the 5th principal value, exercising that proper insight, or what we call NHOMA. Now you've achieved individual manhood because you can make proper judgments with regard to life situations on a consistent basis. Now that you've achieved individual manhood, now you can go to the 6th principal value. And the 6th principal value is Awaree, is marriage. Participate fully in the divine order of creation through uniting with the Afuraitkaitnut female who is your balance. So we're going to go to that page in the book just to talk about specifically that 6th principal value. As we've said, each day of the week is governed by one of the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies. The abosom, the spiritual forces that animate those solar, lunar, and planetary bodies, give their energy to the principle of the day. That means every day of the week, the energy bathing the earth gives us an opportunity to take advantage of that energy and empower that principle that governs the day. So we're constantly aligning our thoughts, intentions, and actions with a force in creation that governs that particular day, and therefore that aspect of our behavior. It's the same for males as well as females. So we have spiritual, but also an earthly, also a cosmic, so to speak, reminder and alignment for us to help us align on a consistent basis when we recognize it and utilize it. Every day of the week is an opportunity to align with divine order for the rest of our lives. So when we get to page 37, the sixth principal value, participate fully in the divine order of creation through uniting with the Afuraitkaitnut female who is your balance. And we say once an Afurakani male has become OBARIMA, meaning man, he is then qualified and has the responsibility to participate fully in the divine order of creation through uniting with the Afuraitkaitnut female who is his balance. Remember, the first principal value of manhood, of OBARIMA, is order. Recognize the divine order of creation, the balance of male and female. First, you had to purify yourself. You had to establish that balance in every aspect of your life. Second principle, you had to arm yourself to defend that balance with your life. Third principle, you had to engage in respect or reviewing every thought, intention, and action continuously, to harmonize every thought, intention, and action with divine order on a continuous basis. That was that fourth principle. Then you had to exercise proper insight to make proper judgments in life throughout the course of your life and achieve individual manhood. That's the fifth principle. Now that you've done all that and you achieve individual manhood, now you can participate fully in the divine order of creation that you recognize in principle number one by actually uniting with the Afuraitkaitnut female who is your balance. Now you're participating in you didn't just recognize it, now you're participating in it by aligning with the Afuraitkaitnut female. As an emanation of Nyame, the great God, Amen, the Afurakani OBARIMA, or man, can only be balanced out when he connects with the emanation of Nyamewa, the great goddess Amenet, the great mother. The emanation of her is the Afuraitkaitnut Oba, the Afuraitkaitnut woman. When an Afurakani OBARIMA, or man, is fully developed, actualized as OBARIMA, as a man, what he has become is a fully developed half. When the Afuraitkaitnut Oba, or woman, is fully developed, actualized as Oba, or woman, what she has become is a fully developed half. The two halves must at some point come together in order to comprise the whole, just as Nyame and Nyamewa are united as the supreme being, the two great halves of the divine whole. The Afurakani OBARIMA, or man, unites with the Afuraitkaitnut Oba, or woman, in order to properly execute his Nkrabeya divine function or mission, the function he is given by Nyamewa Nyame to execute in the world. The union of the OBARIMA and Oba, the man and the woman, is the crystallization of the first principal value of OBARIMA and Oba time, meaning recognize the divine order of creation, the balance of male and female. It is a reenactment and a replenishment of the first act of creation, the union of Nyamewa Nyame, Amenet and Amen, our greatest ancestors and ancestors. They're not human ancestors, of course, as a supreme being. We're not talking about these idiots who talk about God's really just an ancestor who was anthropomorphized and that kind of foolishness. So, the union of OBARIMA and Oba, man and woman, brings a balance to the spirit that can only be experienced. It allows both individuals to connect with Nyamewa Nyame in a balanced and whole fashion and on a regular basis. We must recognize that when we have children, we are bringing Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut ancestresses and ancestors back into the world. These eldresses and elders, ancient spirits, operate through the bodies of newborns, are totally dependent on us and our direction. They're not dependent on us to cultivate, or they are dependent on us to cultivate them in a balanced fashion. We cannot recognize the divine order of creation, the balance of male and female, without having at some point fully participated in this condition, physically and spiritually. So Awaree, marriage, in Akhan culture, is a vehicle of spiritual renewal for the Afurakani OBARIMA man and the Afuraitkaitnut Oba, woman, and also a vehicle of purification for the return of our NHOMA and Samanfa. We move through that marriage process. There's a balance of male and female. There's a spiritual renewal and purification. You have created purified vessels so that you can bring ancestresses and ancestors back in a purified environment so they can be born into the culture, so they can be raised up in the culture, so they can begin to execute their divine function in creation immediately from the time they are children and raised up in that process, not being born in a brainwashed society, worshiping a fictional cartoon character, white God on the cross for their entire childhood up until adulthood, and then finally figure out that they've been wasting decades worshiping a fictional cartoon character. When we engage that process in a proper fashion, we purify ourselves first, become individual men and women, then we unite through that sixth principle, the balance of male and female. These purified vessels unite, and then we create a purified environment, and now we can bring our Nsaman for our ancestresses and ancestors back into the world. Now, then we talk about, of course, only the Afurakani woman can balance out the Afurakani man. Only the Afurakani man can balance out the Afurakani woman. Of course, it's insane to engage in dissexuality, homosexuality, yabosom, the Nsamanfo, nyamewa, nyame, amenet, amen, hate, dissexuality, homosexuality. That's the culture of the whites and their offspring. It is perverse. An Afurakani male would pollute his body, his spirit, and our community, living and deceased, ancestral, if he were to embrace a non-Afuraitkaitnut female, one of the whites and their offspring, white European, white American, white Hispanic, white Latino, white pseudo-Native American, white Hindu, white Arab, and so forth, white Asian, any non-Afuraitkaitnut female, you pollute your spirit, your body, and our community, living and deceased. An Afuraitkaitnut woman would pollute her body, her spirit, and our community, living and deceased, ancestral, if she were to embrace a non-Afurakani male. Just as it is insane to ingest poison, it is anti-Afurakani, anti-Afuraitkaitnut, anti-African to embrace the whites and their offspring on any level whatsoever. But this would be to embrace spirits of disorder. It is poison. Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, Africans, black people, incarnate into the world as spirits of disorder. Whites and their offspring incarnate as spirits of disorder. All of them. And even those who have, quote unquote, believe that they have, quote unquote, friends who are the whites and their offspring. When you have white people you're working with and all this other stuff, they're in a position where they're in a society where they're in control. No different than a pet owner. As long as the pet owner has a little dog and the dog is in their control and they're controlling the entire life of the dog, they'll buy the dog a little sweater. They'll give the dog little pillows and little treats. They may give the dog a little cup of cappuccino at Starbucks when they go to Starbucks. They'd give them whatever they want because they're in control. But as soon as the dog is ready to bite back and say, I'm tired of living up under you, I want to be free and express myself and run out into the field and get with other dogs and so forth, and I'm not going to obey you because I didn't come into the world to obey a cracker, then all of a sudden they need to be disciplined. The same is true in this situation. The whites and their offspring are in political control, socioeconomic control, so they can entertain you as long as you're operating according to their culture. You're named after them, very often worshiping some fictional cartoon character on a cross. You speak their language. You operate based on their culture and so forth. You're like a pet to them because you're under their control. But as soon as you transform, you reject their culture, reject their fake religions, reject their perversity, then you begin to become more receptive. They begin to become angry. They begin to become defensive. And of course, just by virtue of you being in their presence at work or wherever you're at, you can tell the difference between the spirit of the whites and offspring, which they incarnate as spirits of disorder. The emanations from their spirit at any time, whether it's an adult or a white baby in a carriage. The spiritual discordance that manifests and emanates from them is perceptible to children as well as adults. Black children can tell the difference between a white child, even if the white child treated them, quote unquote, nice, like a pet and so forth. They can tell the difference between the spirit or the perverse spiritual energy emanating from one of the whites and their offspring, a white child or a white adult, in comparison to when they're around black children. Because whenever you come in contact with the whites and their offspring, not only are their spirits perverted and disordered because they have no krawa, but they also have their white deceased perverse relatives around them as well. Just like you have your nananom nsamafo spiritually cultivated ancestors connected with you. Whenever you walk in the room, it's not just you. You're walking with some of your people. Whenever they walk in the room, it's not just them. They walk in with some of their people. So you pick up on their own perverse spirit that you have been neglecting all along, just like you can have your nose stuffed up because you're congested. If there's something rotting in the refrigerator, you can't smell it because you're congested. But when you clean yourself out, when you purify yourself, as soon as you open the door, you know something is amiss. Something is corrupt. When we reject white culture, we clean ourselves out, we purify ourselves, and the perverse energy of the whites and their offspring, disordered energy that's always been emanating from them, we now can perceive it very easily, very readily, whether you're a child or an adult. So when you feel that energy coming from them, their own perverse, disordered spirits, as well as their deceased relatives hanging around them, you notice right away something that you may have picked up on peripherally in the past because you were congested spiritually. But now that you're clean, you can feel it much more heavily, their disordered nature. So, all of them incarnate as spirits of disorder. The difference between the whites and our offspring and us is we have a kra, a krawa, a ka, a kaet, a deity dwelling in the head region that governs us. They do not have that. So, that's key. The inclusion of poisonous substances and poisonous people. The whites and our offspring is an act of self-destruction and one of the greatest manifestations of the insanity of self-hatred. Now we go further. Such inclusion not only brings perversity to the Afuraitkaitnut individual, him or herself, but to the ancestresses and ancestors who must return through them via birth. It is an attack on self and our ancestresses and ancestors to force them to be born into the world having a white, Asian, Indian, Arab, white Hispanic, white so-called Native American who are just invading Asians, who invaded the Western Hemisphere and waged war against our people who were already here thousands of years before Asians existed. So when they invaded the Western Hemisphere, came into ancient America, we were already here. They began to wage war against our people. So they've always been the enemies and they've never been Native American. Whether it's them or any other one of the other whites in their offspring, Eurasians, forcing one of your ancestresses and ancestors into the world through a interracial, quote-unquote, coupling, forcing one of your great ancestors or ancestresses who have been guiding you throughout the course of your life since you were a child, and then you copulate with one of these crackers and force that great ancestor who fought against the whites in their offspring to have a white, quote-unquote, parent. You not only pollute their blood, but then you force them to operate under a spirit of disorder, and you're creating discordance within their life from the beginning. So that's self-destructive. And of course, this sexuality, as we show, is insane, self-destructive. Now, in the final portion of the piece here, the planet Afi, Afia, Afua, which is the planet so-called Venus, divinity Afi, which is the title of Het Heru in ancient Kemet. She's the Abosom operating for that planet on the female side. Fi, or Kofi, the male divinity called Min, sometimes called Amin, but the divinity Min in ancient Kemet. On the male side, spiritual forces operating through the reproductive system, also through the central axis of the body. So they're governing that particular planet. They're dealing with reproduction, union, balance, and so forth. So that's key. Let me go. We just want to go down real quick and make sure. Okay, so that's good on that piece. So that's in the OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood book. So we're talking about this nature of Awaree, this balance of male and female. After you achieve individual manhood as well as individual womanhood, then you are eligible to unite with the Afurakani male or Afuraitkaitnut female, who is your half, and fully participate in the divine balance of male and female, the first order of creation. That first order of creation, you being an emanation of Amenet if you're female, you being an emanation of Amen if you're male, that shows your circle of authority with regard to spiritual matters, with regard to life matters. We don't use shrines that are combined. For example, you don't combine ancestral shrines because you're from different clans, just like you don't engage in sexual activity within the same clan because that's incestuous. You don't combine your ancestral shrines when you're married. You connect with your clan members. She connects with her clan members. You connect with the divinity that governs your head if you're male, the male divinity. She connects with the female divinity that governs her head. And then when you come back from those consultations with your spiritual leaders, the divinities that govern your head, and the ancestresses and ancestors that govern your specific clans, then you come back with that information and you work it together in a complementary fashion. The female does not submit to the final word of the male, and that includes forced polygamy. This is an issue within the pseudo-cultural community, but this will not be an issue within Odwiraman, the purified nation, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people in the Western Hemisphere. When you look in our book, Odwiraman, AFAHYE, that was the book that we released during our conference, our first annual Odwiraman Purified Nation conference that we had on June 24th. And our second annual conference is coming up once again in June, summer solstice. We define properly what the nature of an Oman, a nation is, which we said earlier in the broadcast. We're talking about the balance, male and female, operating in harmony with divine order, respecting or reviewing every thought, intention, and action, and aligning each thought, intention, and action with divine order on a consistent basis. This is what we're dealing with. This is why there's a difference between certain marriage structures within our communities ancestrally, and of course the whites and their offspring and those black individuals who follow the polygamous approaches of white Arabs and others and so forth. So we're going to go to the phone lines. If you have any questions or comments on the phone line, hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised. If you have any questions or comments, the chat room, you must log in as a user in order to interact in the chat room. If you don't have a username, you can sign up so you can interact. One of the things that we're checking that information out in March around the equinox is our second annual Sign Ancestral Religious Reversion Conference. We had our first annual conference last year on March 20th. A number of people came out from around the country. We had a number of different presenters dealing with different aspects of ancestral religious practice, born of our blood circles here in the Western Hemisphere. So we presented on Hoodoo, the Akhan tradition in North America. We had a presenter dealing with Vodou, Fon and Ebe, ancestral religion born of the blood circles of our people in North America prior to the Haitian migration into New Orleans. Our people were already practicing Vodou from an ancestral perspective. We had Juju, the Yoruba tradition in North America. We had Wanga, the Ovambo tradition in North America, and Gengan, the Fang tradition, F-A-N-G, Fang tradition in North America, and so forth. So we had a number of different presentations. We're going to have the same kinds of presentations at this conference coming up in March, around the third weekend in March. We will have vendors all day long. Of course, it's a free event, as all of our events are, free and open to Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people only. Check the website, continue to check the website for that, because we will have more details coming out with regard to presenters as well as space for vendors. If you would like to vend, simply send us an email. We can give you the information. The tables will be $30 once again for all days, all from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m., and we can deal with that. I'm going to go to the phone line real quick. Michio on the phone line, number 0744. You had a question or a comment?
Yes, Michio Mo, quick. Odwirafo, Kwesi.
What's up?
All right. I was asking about, all right, what about the children of unconsented generation of rape or molestation? Like, say if the parents were, the woman was raped by a white male, the Odwirafo, or the male was raped, does the child, if that child is of mixed blood but has a Akanfo spirit, does he or she go to that the pre-generation or the generation before to see to ask the Obosum, ask the Obosum of which clan, to find out which clan the mother of the mother that was raped, or if the mother was white or the father was black, or do they go the generation ahead to find out the ancestral clan or see whether they were from the Busio Abasum, or to find out which clan that mother came from, so they could align themselves and realign themselves and harmonize themselves?
Yes, so, okay, and that's a very good question. So the question is dealing with when you have the perversity of interracial coupling. That's always spiritually disordered, whether it came through quote-unquote rape, or even when people believe that they're coming together in a natural fashion. If you're coming together in an interracial coupling and you're black and you're coupling with somebody else, you're still engaged in self-destructive activity. You're still engaged in a form of rape because your OKRA is rejecting it, but then that white individual wants you to engage in it anyway, and you're going against your OKRA and you're being forced in that regard to rejecting who you really are to embrace the criminal. So what happens is when two people come together, no matter who it is, whether you have two black people or a black person and somebody else, a non-black person, when two people come together and they copulate, yes, the sperm and ovum unite and so forth, that creates a vessel for a child, but the spirit that enters into the vessel is either one of the ancestors or ancestresses of the father, or one of the ancestresses or ancestors of the mother. If there's an perverse interracial coupling, you have a black parent and a white quote-unquote parent, and the question is, what happens when you have the black parent, they come in contact with one of the whites in their offspring, one of the Achiwadiepo, which is a term we utilize, spirits of disorder, taboo spirits, divinely hated. Chi means hate, to hate. Adie means things, objects, these are entities. So Echiwadie in Akhan means taboo, those things which are divinely hated, divinely restricted. Achiwadie-fo are the people who are divinely restricted, divinely hated, and so forth, taboo peoples, and so forth. It's our term for the whites in our offspring. So you have a black person who couples with one of the Achiwadie-fo, one of the whites in their offspring. When the sperm and ovum unite, yes, it fuses together as a zygote, but a spirit is drawn into the womb. The question is, if the spirit came from the black parent's side, then that's one of their ancestors or ancestresses who is drawn into the womb. This is one of their ancestresses or ancestors, say it's an ancestress, who's been with that black person before they ever met the cracker. They've been with that black person since that black person was a child, growing up and developing. They've been with that black person since before the child even came out of the womb, when they were in the womb. And when they were born, that ancestress is one of the ones that was assigned to them to guide them throughout the course of their lives, typically. So they're forcing this ancestress now to come through a white womb, or if it was a black womb and coming through the agency of a quote-unquote white parent, father, and so forth. Now you're forcing your black ancestress to come through a union, through a zygote that's going to be physically biracial, but she's the same ancestress. If she was Akhan or Yoruba or whatever it was, she was the same ancestress that she was before she got into the womb. If she was an Akhan ancestress who lived in the quote-unquote 1800s in the Akwamu nation in Ghana and so forth, then she's an Akwamu ancestress. And then she's drawn into a structure, drawn into a quote-unquote interracial coupling. And now, because of that, the body that she takes up a residence in that will develop in the womb is a biracial body. And when she's born, this great Akhan black ancestress is now operating through a biracial body. Purportedly has a white parent as well as a black parent. But in reality, she has a black parent because that white individual is an alien to her and her family. When she was an ancestral spirit 10 months before that and was in the ancestral realm, the last time she was on earth was 200 years ago, and she was living in Afuraitkaitnut. 200 years later, now she's drawn into the womb, and now she's meeting this white criminal individual for the first time in thousands of years. So this is not really her parent in the real sense. It's an alien that the brainwashed descendant connected with and forced her to be born through. So, no, she's not connected to the ancestry of the white quote-unquote parent. In reality, she's an ancestress of the black parent, and whatever ancestral clan she was part of before she got into the womb is the same ancestral clan she is part of now. Whether it's patriclan, matriclan divinities, those are the ones she is connected to, the ones she was connected to before her descendant grew up, became an adult, and connected with this white individual. That's how you determine that. So she goes back to her ancestry and whatever abosom she was connected to pre-incarnation. Those are the same patriclan and matriclan divinities she's still connected to. She has no connection to these white individuals and so-called relatives and so forth. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I was just to add on to that is that's part of the warfare that some of the Odwirafo, they intentionally try to prevent the return of our ancestors and ancestresses by trying to orchestrate biological, chemical, and spiritual warfare by conducting these rapes on the Akanfo people.
Absolutely. And the whites and offspring, they understand. So, for example, you look at Hinduism or culture in Asia, and the vast majority of the whites and offspring on earth, the vast majority of them are not Christians and Muslims per se. You have a lot of brainwashed black people who became Christians and Muslims and all of that. But you look all over China, you look all over India and so forth, as well as, these white Hispanics before they began to speak Spanish, these white Asians who had invaded North America. Part of their culture was reincarnation. They know their perverse spirits return through their perverse blood circles. Even in early Christianity, some aspects or sects of Christianity still dealt with reincarnation. So the whites and offspring understand reincarnation. They know there's a difference in Bebra or reincarnation for us than it is with them. For us, before we return to the womb, before we're drawn into a womb space, an Afurakani or Afuraitkaitnut ancestor or ancestors is drawn up to Inyame. We are assigned a deity that dwells in the head region, Akayet, given a divine function of executing creation, and then we are sent back into the ancestral realm, connected with specific patriclan and matriclan deities with divine power. as well as our ancestral clans, and then we're sent into the world. The whites in our spring, when they die, they spirit separate from the body. They operate in the lower level of the spirit realm, and then they're drawn back into a womb. They never go to Nyame wa Nyame, get a Kra divinity that dwells in the head region. They're not assigned to any divinity, any divine forces in nature, embodiments of divine order. They're just spirits of disorder who go from the physical world to a lower level of the spirit realm and right back into the physical world. But they understand that we are assigned specific abosom that come into the world with us, are born into the world with us. So yes, one of their goals is to copulate some of our people and bring their corrupt, white, perverse, spiritually discordant, deceased relatives back into the world through an interracial coupling, to continuously create channels to bring their criminal relatives back, as opposed to us always copulating with our own people and constantly bringing back Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut ancestresses and ancestors. So, yes, that is part of their strategy that's been true for thousands of years. Even though some of them have embraced Christianity, they manufactured that fake religion to brainwash our people. They don't really go along with that philosophy. They created that to brainwash our people and control our people. They created Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, these different fake religions to control the minds of our people. But they understand death and rebirth. They know they operate on the lower level, and they always seek, and that is a form of warfare, to try to bring their criminal relatives back in these biracial, quote-unquote, unions and so forth. Okay, so yeah, I said that we appreciate the call. I'm just going to check the chat room right quick. Okay, so that was all we had. So we can end the broadcast here. One thing that we did do is we created a different page on Facebook. We were getting closely approaching that 5,000 friend limit. So we created a separate page, just an author page on Facebook, which is simply called Odwirafo, and we'll add all updates for this broadcasts that are coming up, new books that are released, articles, of course, broadcasts, archives, as well as events, monthly events in D.C., as well as different places in the country, as well as conferences and so forth. For those who asked about the books, the sale, we still have that sale going on. We went ahead and extended it because some people had to wait, Friday to be able to take advantage of that sale. So our entire 23-book set for $100, which includes shipping. You can take advantage of that now going to the NHOMA, the publications page on our website. Now, our books range between $8 and $11. All the ebook versions are free. Downloads from the website for those who cannot afford the $8 to $11 price. You can download any book that we have for free. That's a permanent piece that we have. That's the way we approach the dissemination of information. But if you support the work that we are doing, you can go to the NHOMA page, the publications page, and take advantage of that sale. We decided to keep it through the weekend, but we're going to remove the button for that. So you can take advantage of that. The entire 23-book set for, it's really $91 plus the $9 shipping, which is $100 total. That will assist us in our process of not only our free book giveaways. We've given away over 1,100 books free to the different presentations, people at the presentations all around the country. We continue to engage that process, and every event that we have, our events are always free, and we always give away a free copy of the book that we are speaking on to everybody who attends the event until we run out. So we've given away over 1,100 soft cover versions of our books, in addition to the thousands that are downloaded for free on a monthly basis. So for us to be able to continue to do that, every time you make a purchase, you contribute to that process. You're also contributing to our institution, Akwamu. We have a separate Akwamu page for our institution. We're going to expand our services. We already have our Nokwadifo book distributor option for anybody who would like to work immediately. Self-employed, you can purchase our books 35% off wholesale and then sell them retail, of course. And since they only range between $8 and $11, when you sell them to friends, family, coworkers. They see that they're only $8, $9, $10. They typically sell themselves. So we already have that in operation so that people who need income, they can begin to generate income right away by becoming employed. We need to have those options for our people. We don't just talk about what we need to do. We need to have those economic options in place. When we establish our center, we'll be able to expand employment opportunities in the shipping, printing and shipping arm of our operations, because we do publish, print, and ship all of our books in-house. We do not send our books out to printers for other people to print. We print them ourselves in-house on our own printers in color. So when we have the center, we can expand employment opportunities in that aspect, in addition to the self-employment operation, which is already in existence right now. And we have people who are distributing right now. And we'll also have all of our conferences. We'll expand our class offerings and training, inclusive of the OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood training, which also includes that self-employment option for Afurakani males, young, and all of that. So if you support that work, if you already have the books and you'd like to support our work, we'll put the link in the chat room real quick on the fundraising platform, and you can see this on our Facebook page as well. And any contribution is welcome. You can have the option of receiving one or more of our books in return for a donation. So it's not just a donation. If you would like to receive books, just let us know. You make the donation, we can send those out to you so you get that immediate tangible benefit for donating. But then the long-term benefit, of course, is an institution, an educational institution. It's an institution of learning, of healing, of training, of employment, and entrepreneurship. So this is what we deal with. That final piece with regard to polygamy, some people will ask, are there any situations where it can be harmonious? Or some people ask for that. In a minority of instances, it is. For example, some females prefer that. If they're engaged in a certain kind of work, some males engage in a certain kind of work, for example, healing work. So to make a correlation, if you're a neurosurgeon and you're standing on your feet for 10 hours or 11 hours, engaged in that process throughout the course of the day, and then, after you do that, you basically, take time off, get some rest, go to sleep because you have to get up the next day and do the same thing. You may not be in contact with anybody for a few days. When you're engaged in that surgery for 10 hours, you're not going to stop if somebody calls you on the phone just because they want to kick it and talk, because you're engaged in a process that's serious and focused. It's the same thing with regards to healing. So, for example, some sisters are healeresses. They engage in divinatory practices. They're healing our people. Engaged in divination, procuring medicine, healing our people on a regular basis. Engage that process throughout the course of the day. When you are in that zone, it's the same thing with males. When you're in that zone, when you go to the shrine and you engage that process of adebitsa, of divination, and you're divining for clients, as well as divining for the Oman, for the nation, about what moves need to be made, what initiatives need to come forward and be brought forth and grow and develop and so forth, as well as just dealing with healing work and so forth. When you're engaged in that for hours upon hours throughout the course of the day, you're in a zone. You don't have time to communicate with anybody. Any communication is a distraction. Unless there's an absolute emergency, you don't need to talk to anybody that day or the next day or the next day. We can go 3, 4, 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, 8 days without talking to anybody because we're in a zone. And then after that 6 or 7, 8 days, then we can connect with somebody, decompress to a certain extent, engage in some activity and so forth. But then after that, we get back in another zone and we keep working and developing and healing and so forth for a number of other days. The same thing with a healeress. So some who are engaged in that kind of work, and maybe their children are already grown and out of the house, they go for days at a time just engaged in healing work, and that's what they want to do. So they don't have time to communicate with someone every single day. They don't have time. They don't have a desire to do so. They can communicate with someone, a husband, every few days or once a week and so forth, or maybe twice a week, but they don't need to engage in that kind of interaction daily. For them, they don't mind that there's a second wife who the husband is interacting with during those days that the healeress is engaged in her work. So sometimes that's workable in a situation like that. That's not what we're dealing with tonight. We're dealing with this nature of forced polygamy as a form of domestic abuse. We address that issue because it comes up on a regular basis. We've had numerous people asking us to do a broadcast dealing with that. We are not going to allow that to destroy and disrupt and degrade the development of Odwiraman, the purified nation, Afuraitkaitnut people in the Western Hemisphere. We must examine our culture, align with the abosom that govern our OKRAA, the divinity that governs our heads, connect with our Nananom Unsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of our direct blood circles. That is our governmental structure. That is our council of elders and eldresses, headed up by that spiritual leader. And therefore, this is where we get our direction from. The female does not support or submit to the desires or misguided desires of the male any more than the male submits to the misguided desires of the female and makes self-destructive decisions that causes problems within their own relationship, within the relationship they have with children and other Afuraitkaini people, all under the guise of ancestral culture, but in reality, Eurocentrism in blackface. So we're not going to allow that to destroy our culture. We've got one more call on the phone line. Michelle on the phone line, number 7412. You had a question or comment?
What's up, cool brother Kwesi? Man, this is one of...
Can you speak up a little bit? I can barely hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me?
That's a little bit better.
Okay, let me...
a little bit better.
Give me 1 second. Here we go. Is that better?
Yes, that's better.
Okay. Yeah, this is probably one of the most... Every show is profound, but this show just cleans house. And I chimed in for a minute, and listening to everything that you were saying, I actually got off of the phone to have a conversation with someone about, not necessarily about what you're talking about, but it caused me to make a quick shift in a whole other direction. It really seemed like something was wrong with the way that the whole polygyny thing is being pushed. I always knew there was a place, space, and time for it, but when I started to see how dogmatic, it's become, especially when I see it like on social media and so on and so forth, and I was like, 9 times out of 10, none of these people who are talking about it are actually going to find themselves really in a situation for it, and they'll end up destroying the potentially more healthy monogamous relationships that they already have in an attempt to push this other agenda. And then it led me to go back to what you were saying about the pedophilia component, because there's an individual who I've seen on YouTube before who has this church. I don't know where it's at, but they push what they call biblical polygyny. And when I actually saw this man, pastor or whatnot, interview one of the young ladies in his church, she looked like she was in her early 20s, but she looked like somehow she was Caucasian. And then she also, and it was a brother who's a pastor. It's a black man who's a pastor. But the young lady, is Caucasian. She's in her early 20s, but she still looked like she was like under like 12, 13, 14. Like she was all of about 16, 15 or 16. And then when he turned around and interviewed her husband, the gentleman that he had just married to this woman, he was another black man. And he looked like he was in his, like he could have been all of 30. And I was just like, you just said this. And so I was mind blown because I just saw this the other day on YouTube, and I said, this don't even look right. You know, for two reasons. Off the gate, I just wanted to bear witness to what you were saying as far as that pedophilia component, but it just happened to be within a church that pushes what they call biblical polygyny. You know, so that's it. That's all I want to say to that. It's a very powerful show.
Mirase, we appreciate that. Appreciate the call. And yes, that's whether people are engaged in that directly as, you know, straight pedophiles, like, of course, perverts like Malachi York and these criminals and so forth, but hidden under the guise of Afrocentrism and culture and spirituality and so forth. But then you have that quote-unquote intellectual pedophilia where in reality you don't really want a woman. You really want a child to submit to you and see you as their leader. And, you know, you're the final word and you direct exactly what they say. What you're really saying is you don't want a wife. What you really want is a daughter. You want a child, you want a daughter, you want your daughter, and you're trying to marry your daughter. And you're having children with your daughter. That's what's really happening. And people see that's what's really happening, and they pretend like they don't see what's really happening, but that's what's really happening. And we're going to weed that out. So that's not part of our culture. We need to expose that and show that it's not part of our culture. And the key is, on one hand, we build up real Afurakani, OBARIMA, Afurakani men, and at the same time, Afurakani women, but they must recognize the reality that the only entity that they submit to is their own Ka'et, their own OKRA. They don't submit to anybody else other than their own OKRA. You don't set the deity aside, the goddess aside, and the ancestresses and ancestors aside to submit to a male who's trying to control you through lust. So that's the key.
Yes. I appreciate you. Appreciate the show. Yes.
Okay. Many y'all say that. We appreciate it. Okay, and we have one more call on the phone line. Michelle on the phone line, number 1613. You got a question or a comment? Oh, sounds like we couldn't hear on the phone line. Okay. All right, so there was a little issue with that one. So for that, anybody, if you have any questions or comments, just hit us up on the Facebook notification. So the notification for this particular broadcast, if you have any questions or comments on this broadcast, just go into that notification for this AWAREESEM, Forced Polygamy as a Form of Domestic Abuse broadcast. You can post the questions in there. The archive for this broadcast will be up in the next 20 minutes or so, 20 minutes to a half an hour. And of course, we will post it on YouTube by tomorrow. So, again, we thank you for tuning into the broadcast. We will meet again. That's up.